So with that, I would also like to introduce my outstanding panelists who are going to join me on this. So I'll start with Evelyne Yehudit, who I know many of you recognize. Please come up. Evan is president of Healthy Longevity Medicine Society and medical director at Sheba Longevity, and truly a catalyst when it comes to longevity in every aspect. And then we have Elena Bonfiglioli, who is a global business leader, healthcare, pharma, and life science at Microsoft, and also experienced healthcare strategist and a meditator since the age of 22, which is just a few years ago, and also a longevity catalyst. So thank you for joining us, Elena. And then we have Anna Erat, and Anna is a clinical lecturer at the Faculty of University of St. Gallen Executive School, and also the first female medical director in the history of the clinic Hirladen. And you've also really had a lot of sports athletes who you've sort of tangibly taken into the longevity sector. Last but definitely not least, Paola Telfer, CEO and founder of Sense.ai, a truly interesting breakthrough technology that we're going to learn more about with a full range of neuroscience-orientated interventions when it comes to brain health. And you're also a serial entrepreneur, and you're also very invested into longevity. So warm welcome to all of you. I was going to sit in the middle, but this is a good thing. I'll sit at the end because you're the ones who aren't. No, you're the ones who are in focus. So this is perfect. The thing is, we already had our panel discussion actually when we met. So I wish we could, redo that, because you all have so much competency, knowledge, but also so much passion. So I thought I would just open with a generic question, just so people can get, a feeling for what you're doing. If you could just briefly tell us what you're working with at the moment when it comes to longevity and personalized medicine, and also, of course, digital transformation. So I'll start with you, Evelyne.
Thank you so much. First of all, once again, Mark, Tobias, thank you so much for leading really in the field. For me, as a clinician, I am working mostly with patients, for the patients, of course, doing also science and education, and then being a part of those communities here is amazing. But it's really a patch family, I would say, longevity medicine. It's a work of governance, it's a work of AI leaders, it's a work of us doctors, clinicians, tech, and people like you who are bringing us all together and also leading the investment part, because without this, there will be no fuel. And what I'm working at is, besides of being the director at Sheba Longevity Center, which is the first longevity department in a public academic hospital, which has a little bit of an impact as well. I work with private patients, and I work as one of the people who want to bring longevity medicine next to cardiology, next to oncology as a medical field, so that every person can have and find longevity medicine with their GPs, with their hospitals, with their practices, wherever they are. So really to have it as an accessible field.
And I also want to highlight, because Sheba Longevity Center has been, really pushing the needle forward of sort of integrating it to the world's first longevity clinic in an academic hospital, and that is paving the way forward to how longevity can access the healthcare system. So thank you. Yes, Elena.
Yes. Very, very glad to be here. So professionally, what I do, I'm the global business lead for healthcare and life sciences at Microsoft. Evidently, I have a very tech-driven perspective to what we can do in healthcare, what we can do in discovery, life sciences. And in all of this, I would say, if we're really honest as a human species, we cannot ignore that there is no health without longevity. And I would argue, and we can discuss it later, that for healthcare to become really sustainable, for the pivot to health to really happen, we need to look at longevity as the shift, as the engine that shifts the system to a proactive, preventative healthcare. There's a lot that technology can do, not alone, but definitely that is, when I think about, I've been at Microsoft 23 years. I've started my career doing welfare policy simulations in the Italian government, even before working in France, doing oncology patient support systems. So across all these different disciplines, one thing has remained very clear: the power of data. the power of data. Doesn't matter if it was in the floppy disk that I used when I was coding the data sets of 60 million Italians, or the data in charts in hospital on the oncology bedside, or today in the cloud. If we don't have the data, we will never be able to have the instruments to manage our longevity potential for humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to dive more into data because that is truly, you know, a very essential perspective. But I also want to applaud Microsoft and under your leadership, because you've also done a lot of clinical trials, really implementing mindfulness, the sense of community, and that's also been in a Harvard research. So it's important to show corporates who are actually doing ventures for longevity.
Thank you.
And Anna, tell us about what you're working with at the moment.
Well, before I start, I have to apologize for my moon boots.
Oh.
However,
We're in Davos.
Thank you. They're very fashionable to notice. A few years ago, during the COVID pandemic, I was the chief medical officer for the World Economic Forum for the COVID strategy and managing the COVID operational part. And I was running, as you can imagine, back and forth everywhere, all around, all the time. And at that time, I said, I'm just going to live in my moon boots every time I'm in Davos, the entire week, without exceptions. So here I am. So apologies for that. I also would like to really thank Maximon and the longevity investors for organizing this and bringing so many actors together, because we can't innovate or push innovation if we don't create an entire ecosystem, including competitors. And this is what I think is so grand about the organizers, is that you have also, I mean, you've included everyone, potential competitors as well. I think this is grandezza. And so getting back to what I do, I actually, after being a clinical director, I still see some patients, still see my athletes that I work with, but I have the great opportunity to also help a few companies and organizations to build on their strategy, on scalability, advise them on various aspects of health, prevention, and longevity. Two of them are here today. So CARE is one of the organizations I work with, and the other one is the Women's Brain Foundation, where I just started on the board. So great, and thank you for having me here today.
We're so happy to have you here and to listen more. And Care will also be sharing some insights later. Elena.
Paola.
Elena.
So I'm Paola Telfer, and I'm CEO and founder of Sensei. And so I'm coming at it from a very different perspective. I'm in consumer technology, so disruptive technology that we launched about a year ago into the consumer market, and it's called Sensei. I've worked, so my educational background's not as a doctor, but rather as an engineer. So, and I have worked, I'm from Canada, so I've worked in the public sector, serving government and doing innovations with electronic medical records, et cetera, in the past. And so in this part of my life, I'm really interested in impact and quick impact at scale. And so I chose to approach this company as a consumer wearable. And so Sensei is a neurotech platform, and it's both hardware and software. And this is designed right down to the electrodes, the firmware, everything by myself and a co-founder. And so what the audience for this, the people who buy Sensei are looking for peak performance, and they're looking for advanced meditation. So a bit like what they were talking about, I think Patrick mentioned in the last panel, is how do we frame mental wellness as optimization, and that's what we've done. So when people come and use Sensei, it's a gamified app that works on any phone, tablet, and we actually start them out with anything to do with the me level issues that we look at as blocks. So anxiety, anything to do with attention disorders, insomnia or sleep issues, I should say, and brain fog due to aging. And we resolve those first before we unlock the next level of the game, which is now about creative insight, letting go of the past, and mindfulness. And then we unlock much more advanced meditations. And so that's the way that we've approached it. We've gone to consumer. We have about 5,000 people on the platform right now. What's exciting and next, I'll just share for us, is that we've we've collected such a great data set, a very rich data set that includes EEG, event-related potentials, which is also a brain function test, heart rate variability. And because we've done this longitudinally, we've discovered that we have over 100 biomarkers that track with age. And so we've partnered with Buck Institute to build a biological brain age clock. And Buck will be publishing that probably in the summer. That'll come out.
Wow, congratulations. And also showcasing the synergies of collaboration, which are key. So this is on the market? It's
been on the market since August 23.
Yeah, and there's an app correlated to it, and then it measures all the different biomarkers.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of when we're talking about longevity, and I'm specifically focused on the brain, but generally speaking, I think gamification is so important, right? It has to be fun and engaging for people to start adopting new habits. And so for us, people start, and it's gamified in that they do an assessment, and then they're recommended a mission. So it's an interstellar travel game. That mission would be like 2 months long, and it might be around sleep. Often is around sleep. It's like a really key domino. And then they measure again in the middle, and they measure again at the end. And the measurement is a 10-minute test, and it's an assessment that they do with another piece of hardware. But it's not a test we made up. It's a test that is, thank you, Anna. It's a test that is a standard test called event-related potentials they would do in a lab environment. And we've just taken it from the lab to the home, hours to minutes, and hopefully made it fun, so.
And I think that sort of puts a really important point that in order to really integrate longevity, of course, we need policy, we need data, but it's also the behavioral mind shift. I mean, both in policy, but above all in individuals. So I sort of want to dive a bit into, but starting with data, and maybe, Elena, maybe coming from your perspective, sort of on the tech side, explain, why is data so important, which might be obvious, but how can we also leverage the huge amount of data that we have and really make it, valuable data when we're talking in the context of longevity?
Yes, it's a broad topic, and I think we should have an investors' lunch just on that, longevity data. So a couple of considerations. First of all, when I think about the data footprint that we can collect at birth, I think there we have the first gap that really cripples the interventions that we can have in longevity. But there are governments in the world today that are really engaging in newborn screening, genetic screening. That's where you start the footprint of longevity, healthy longevity. Having those data sets together with what we start recording as we traditionally go through healthcare, which is the data that gets into the electronic medical records, which are systems of records that are still very low interoperable, unfortunately. Then there are the other observations. We know that images, right? They are really the observations, and we use them from diagnostics, clinical trial, understanding of disease, and then everything that is the raw data that comes from lab results and labs, and then everything that comes from our habits, how many times we pick up that iPhone, when we wake up, when we go to sleep. So bringing that data set together is a key to unlock our longevity potential. Is it technologically possible? Absolutely, right? And what's interesting is that, so leave aside interoperability and making that happen in a data platform, bringing those data with high stewardship, security, compliance, all of that, that's possible. What's interesting is that in the era of AI, we start to see that foundation models go beyond understanding text, which is the famous, everybody knows, the GPT-4 and so on. But it's really understanding images, really understanding this multimodality foundation model capability, which means we have the data, the additional reasoning capability for the new era. So what are we waiting for to start the ID card of longevity when the newborn comes to Earth? And so my assumption, and I want to be a bit provocative here, but I think that really generation beta, so the newborns of 2025, will be the first generation to have sustainable longevity thanks to a different management of data sets, from which we can look at biomarkers, from which we can look at, basically how the onset of chronic conditions can be prevented. And if today that age is 62, if we discover, our true real considerations and conditions at 62, there's not much that can be done except for sick care coming in and spending a lot of money and looking after us. But if we bring that to 63 years before, meaning when the baby is conceived, not when the baby is born, when the baby is conceived, then we really have the potential of using those data. And I purposefully, I'm not going into the tech element because tech capabilities are absolutely there. We need to have a view of health that is different, policy interventions that consider that doing those screenings, understanding those biomarkers, shifting to preventive health is the only way forward. I'll stop here.
No, thank you. And sort of diving into that, shifting, both policy, but really making an understanding of the correlation of preventive health, personalized medicine, and a healthy, thriving society. Evelyne, you meet so many, whether it's, researchers, institutes, politicians, and so forth. What's your perspective? How is this educational process really progressing? And what do you see are the innovations in diagnostics and wearable health that are sort of paving the future now?
Sure. So first of all, I couldn't agree more with Elena, and hopefully soon we can manifest that also in a paper. But I believe that the development is good, and most of you here are from the sector of economy, and one of the most important statements I think is longevity medicine goes hand in hand with medical economy, which is one of the main drivers at all for our sustainability. It doesn't matter which sector we are coming from. From our side, we are doing as much as we can to bring the right education to all sectors of population, starting with doctors, bringing it now into the university medical curriculum, so that when you will have new students coming from the university, you will not see them first learning about longevity online. They will actually come out from the university fresh with the baseline understanding and actually drive further the ideas and apply it to you and to any other sectors. And maybe your doctor will be able to explain to you something that maybe your scientific advisory board is doing right now. So that's number one. Number two is technology is exponential and it's great, and a lot of non-invasive technology will be available for longevity. So starting from PEMF, like pulse electromagnetic field, and HRV stimulation, many other non-invasive things which will be applicable for the population 62 and 82 plus. They will not be restricted so much by the senolytics or geroprotectors pharmacokinetics, right? Which I'm super excited about, and this is the future, but a little bit more difficult for those who are already older and comorbid. I think what's very important is that a lot of those tech solutions will be available for populations who are already sick, right? So we are talking about longevity as something very not only preventative, but really anticipatory. So it's all about your quantitative risk of getting sick from what in 10, 20, and 30 years. And what you can do as an individual rather than very generalized lifestyle interventions. And we will have more cancer survivors soon than new cancer patients. That's where the statistics is growing. We reached epidemics of cancer about 6 years ago. We will reach the epidemics of cancer survivors very soon as well. How can those people actually benefit from longevity without increasing their further risk of getting more cancer? That's just one example of what would be very impactful for you as investors. So technologies for longevity, not only for those who are healthy. And I think last but not least, really work in the clinical field, bringing longevity into the public academic settings. Again, not only to make it more accessible for people from all sectors of societies all over the world, but also to get more data, more quality data. Finally, moving from this retrospective old biobanks with a lot of gaps, with a lot of, we do things in AI which are called deep fakes. I don't know, for those who work with it, they know. We just we imagine patients, and then we built on that. It's not exactly perfect, and we are trying to get the real data out of it now in longevity medicine. So those are the things, I guess, that will bring most impact, I hope.
Well, it's definitely driving in the right way. If anyone wants to add, just go ahead.
I was just going to add on the interoperability side of things, the original question, because it's a problem like from an engineering perspective I've seen for decades. And I don't think the incentive is there to solve the problem. The problem is so onerous, right? Who's going to bear the burden? I think there's a couple principles that will shift that finally. And I think one of them will be to put the patient at the center of it. And so the patient owning their own data, right? Regardless of where the data is collected, right? So whether it's wearables in the hospital, et cetera. And then the second part of that is AI agents, right? And so if you can imagine, the amount of data skyrocketing, and whether it's a practitioner or it's data analyst, we can no longer analyze it, effectively. And so an AI agent would be able to, collect data from these different sources, make sense of them, contextualize, and then also in a very early way, like we're talking about, you're saying -1. Well, at least, at 20 years old or so, they can start to actually give advice and recommendations. And that might look very, very different from, let's say, like an intervention, like a surgery that would happen much later in time. At this point, maybe it would look more like physio. And then if you can imagine an AI agent catching it early enough, they would be able to actually give you more of a microdose of an intervention, right? So I think that's where things are going.
Yeah, and
May I quickly add? I think I absolutely couldn't agree more. And just a year ago, I was at MedTech, Health Tech conference where I gave a talk, and we talked about why in healthcare, why technology is being adapted so incredibly slowly. And so the people in the audience, they were like, well, the doctors, they're all so old and they're so grumpy and, they're so conservative. I mean, maybe, perhaps, but I can tell you that at least my generation of doctors, or at least in my ecosystem of doctors, we are so eager to receive technology that we can actually use. But it's not technology. Technology doesn't solve anything if you can't use it.
Exactly.
And if you can't implement it. And just for you to understand the level of problems we have. So when the pandemic, luckily now over, arguably, but nevertheless, when it started, we had to report the positive cases in the beginning per fax. I mean, I'm really not kidding. Yeah. Fax machines. I mean, then it changed, but it took a few months. But so I'm just telling you, it's, yes, we as doctors, we can improve a lot, without a doubt, but it's not only because we are old and grumpy.
No, definitely not. And especially when we have, clinicians like yourself and sort of tapping into that, because there's sort of twofold that comes to mind. The one, the upskilling that is also required. I mean, we talk a lot about upskilling in all different sectors, but the upskilling required of clinicians and so forth to really be able to integrate AI technology. But also, my second thought was, with your experience, I mean, you've worked a lot with sport athletes and you've sort of seen that catalysm of a sport mentality with longevity. What do the clients usually come in? Do they have their own data and like, I have my wearables, and do you have to accumulate the data and then you make a pathway of their lifestyle? How does it sort of work today? And are the consumers, your patients, more educated today? Which I presume is yes. But.
Absolutely. I think our clients and patients are extremely educated and very health literate and very well read. And they're early adapters because a lot of them, as I mentioned before, are athletes. And for them, it makes a lot of difference whether they're a millisecond slower or faster. So anywhere where they can improve and optimize their health and performance and resilience, they will go for it. And particularly, we talked about before this panel, in the pre-panel, particularly in fields where there's a lot of money involved, like Formula One, which is one of the fields where I'm involved. They are extremely early adapters of anything that can be useful. Anything that can be useful and it's not considered doping. So, which is also going to be an issue, but that's so very early adapters, and it's really wonderful for us that are taking care of these people to profit from the data and really being fed also before we talk to them. So in a way, real time kind of transmission of data, because it helps really to manage and optimize.
Of course, proactive, personalized.
Exactly.
I want to engage the people who are sitting here, because I know it's a nice conversation on stage, but you also, I'm sure, have a lot of interesting questions. And please do not be, if one starts, then usually others follow. So, I mean, if anyone has any questions, please. Perfect. Thank you so much. Love when someone is first to go.
Hello, I'm Mariette Warden. Thank you so much for all this so far. I'm wondering if you can help me out, because tomorrow I'm actually moderating a panel on how we can use technology to increase equitable access to healthcare. And I didn't really hear that come up today, and maybe you can help me out with some other ideas.
Good question.
I can start, and then I will pass you the floor as well, because I think there is a lot of thought leadership there. So, I'm a big believer that technology is an equalizer. Okay. So if you think about the potential today of voice as an input to query information, but also voice as an input in a patient-to-doctor conversation today, there is this unstructured conversation that becomes structured text that can go into the electronic medical record, can be queried with a prompt, like you send a text message to your friends. Similarly, if you are in the radiology workflow, there are now capabilities, this multimodality foundation model I was talking to you about before, which, by the way, we open source a lot of that, MedParse being one. You say, now I'm looking at this image, help me understand this image better, right? Help me sort through similar images from similar patients. I can build cohort. I'm giving you this example to say that we have gone away from difficult, clunky technology. The user interface for the era of AI has become voice, text, and gesture. And so I do believe that we have an opportunity as society to distribute technology more fairly, more equally, but the usability of it has gone way more simple. And we come from a world in which few data scientists paid an enormous amount of money, could not just distribute their capabilities. Now, I think it's important, however, that the technology behind longevity, for example, repurposing drugs for longevity or understanding new biomarkers and so on, don't remain elitarian. They need to come to the masses. But for that, you need different policies. So, do you want to comment?
Democratize.
I would love to comment quickly, or give another example. Very trivial example, but a real example. So, people who live in rural areas or in countries where they don't have really access to various centers or professionals that they would like to see in person. And that's a lot of people that are affected by that, even in Switzerland. With technology, they can reach whomever they want to reach. And second of all, also real life data in real time can be transmitted. You don't need extremely fancy gadgets or wearables. In some cases, yes, but in many cases, no. And that can be transmitted from anywhere for a very low cost. So you can really scale in this sense and reach people on various levels and geographic regions through technology.
Evelyne, do you want to comment briefly?
Surely agreeing on everything. I guess maybe also just as an advice for anybody who is investing in something, the more automatized is the solution you are looking at, the more scalability comes with it, the more benefit there is. Maybe in a little bit longer term, but for sure. And we see that I spent 15 years of my life in China. I still split my time between Israel and China. We have over 400 AI hospitals there. AI hospital means zero human. Zero human means zero human mistake, but also a lot of efficacy that comes with it. And it is allowing accessibility for patients all over, and still you can upscale, right, and go more individual in any solution that you have. But the tech is basically the way you have equitability, whatever you're looking at, men, women, biological age and gender, different regions, geographically, ethnically, and social class. And also by generations. When we were talking about aging, healthy aging, the semantics doesn't really matter here. The fact that by voice recognition, a grandpa that is 90 years old and has absolutely no idea about how to type, my father who is 70 doesn't know how to use keyboard, he can do by voice recognition everything that he needs with a doctor in metaverse. That's it. And that's for me is really the equity. That is.
And actually that would be a recommendation for investment. I think let's future-proof the solution so that the input and the output is as easy as a text or a voice or a picture.
Make it usability.
Right, usability.
I'll just close on one point, which is I totally agree with what Evelyne's saying. It's about scalable technology. I think that's the disruption. That's how we make it accessible. And as an example, back to what Anna was saying with the Formula One racers, for example, they've been using neurofeedback forever, right? Because it's necessary. Exactly. They care about that increase in performance. And now, like let's say that would have been quite expensive for them, in tens of thousands, to do. Even for myself, when I first started doing technology like this for my mental health, I spent $15,000 in 5 days, right? So most people can't do that. But we're just years in, and we've got a headset that's $1,500, right? And so that's accessible to a lot more people, and they can use it daily, and they can share it. And then having said all that, that's still expensive for some people. And so I think that's where there's partnerships that we can incentivize with foundations and startups, because startups just can't take that burden on, the financial burden on. But there's partnerships that can be done, for sure.
Collaboration and partnerships, yes.
And then another point that we already discussed earlier as well, which again sounds so trivial, but about 80% of all technological solutions that are being developed fail to reach the market. And the reason for that, one of the main reasons for that, which has been quite well researched, is that they don't think about the end user, and they don't involve the end user from the very beginning. So it doesn't really help to involve the end user in the very end, right before going on to the market. Involve them extremely early on, or from the very beginning, ideally, and think about who is the end user.
That's a very good point. Who is the end user? So Steve Jobs did when he started Apple, where he thought about the end user and everything. Okay, time is flying, and I know that people want to have a leg stretcher. So let's just end on a high. And what would that be? That would be one innovation or policy or instigation that you find would be vital to drive longevity forward. And it could also be an incentive here to people who are investors or maybe policymakers, something that you feel, this is important. So I'll start with Paola.
I really liked what Patrick was sharing about addiction being, it doesn't matter if it's a drug, if it's food. Addiction is something that happens when we are generally unhappy, right? And I think mental wellness has to be, the lens we look at it has to be shifted. I'm focused on the brain. I'm very passionate about the brain. I think that when we look at longevity, the brain impacts not just mental health but also physical health. It is sort of it's the cornerstone of who we are. So anyone who's had a concussion and has lost their cognitive abilities understands the fear of losing that, and we all have that coming up as we get older, right? So from my perspective, one of the most interesting innovations is around biological clocks. That's where we're going to get markers that we can actually track, markers that we can reverse, markers that we can intervene with really early. And in particular, of course, I'm really excited about biological brain age clock.
I think the question of reimbursement in the medical field is extremely important, and we are there sometimes in the stone ages. Prevention is a lot of times, and longevity and healthy optimizing or healthy aging is not really reimbursed. And how do we do that? Well, in Switzerland, at least, the health insurance companies are usually a third of all the health expenditure is covered by the insurance companies. So we need to make sure that we have policies that allow and reimbursement and also somehow motivate also the providers to provide any kind of information or technology so that we can all benefit from it. And how do we do that? This is also another discussion we already have had. I don't have a solution to all of this, but we do need to do much more lobbying. In the energy field, there's lobbying on a daily basis. We don't really do much lobbying, so we need to put effort and think about creating creative solutions of lobbying.
I think lobbying is a really good thing, and maybe something can come out of LIC. Yes.
Yeah, I love that point on lobbying, and I would call it advocacy, right? With facts and with experiences, but advocacy would be great. I would love to see longevity really mainstreamed into the core of health and R&D policies, really mainstreamed in there and not looked at as in isolation, but also mainstreamed across therapeutic area. So there cannot be a Ministry of Health that doesn't have a longevity perspective, right? It's almost like, how can you do energy without sustainability? So I think that would be fantastic. On a personal level, I would say, you mentioned it at the beginning, I did meditation from when I was 22, a long time ago. And I think that is a neuromodulation there that really helps us to stay longeve, but definitely to be more satisfied. So that hue curve looks very different if you meditate every day. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good reminder.
Difficult because there's so many wishes in the field, but I think for everybody, very generally, I wish good decisions, and good decisions come with wisdom, and wisdom would come, I think, a lot in longevity through algorithms that will help us to have health trajectory, risk assessment. So us as doctors can then individually tell the patient, your top 5 priorities are those. You can't possibly do everything. Secondly, our dear policymakers could take a snapshot then of those leaders, such as in Saudi Arabia. I can't say enough how important and great the work is there by His Highness. And thirdly, investors and everybody who has resources, right, for mutual benefit, for you to have a quantitative, objective measure rather than just asking and predicting and guessing, right, rather than to be a prophet, which you will probably in Wall Street rather than in tech then. But then having really an objective measure you can put in and be navigated by it, I think that would be my real dream, and we are working on it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of expertise. And I think when it comes to advocacy and lobbying or creating longevity development goals, our own ministry where people like you are part of it and really pushing the needle forward, and also all of you, then we're going to get somewhere. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your time. And before, a round of applause for my panelists.